We're standing on the top of San Giuliano Plateau. In this part of the plateau, the highest point of the plateau, they call La Rocca. This is the place where a castle in the medieval period was built atop of an Etruscan fortified zone. When you come up to this area, you go through a gate, which is to my left, and you come on to this part of the high rise of the plateau. Above us here we have a crumbled medieval tower. Part of it has fallen down and created the look of a natural hill. It's not a natural hill, it's cultural. When we scraped the surface, we started to uncover this gateway into the medieval village and the medieval fortified area. We walk this way, we see the entryway through the fortification into the medieval village. And over this gateway here, there was an arch stretching over above anyone that would enter into the village.
The first thing that the people who lived here did was put in a complex threshold that would have secured the doorway and made this a safe way for pedestrians to access what is a civic ceremonial complex of what is essentially monumental architecture, protected by these sort of entryway gates, and then associated with a cistern that would have gathered water that fell from the sky, and then would have been protected by some type of probably wooden superstructure over top of it. So people here would have had all the sort of necessities of life. They would have had security, they would have had water. We found many remains of animals that were consumed as food, and also dice that they would have used in perhaps entertaining themselves as the guards stood watching who came in and out of this part of the settlement.
And what you should imagine is over here, there was a tower. And here, a small tower that the guards are standing beside. And just on the other side here is a drop of about 15 meters down the side of the plateau. So that anyone approaching this castle fortified zone would be under the watch of any watchman standing atop the tower. We have here an excellent example of very well made high medieval architecture. The blocks are very well cut and prepared, and the link between them is very little mortar. It's extremely well produced, put directly on top of bedrock and sealed with mortar on top. The face is prepared on at least two sides here in the corners, and then on the top and in between you're placing rocks, filling it with mortar. Between two towers, the entryway into the village is here, and above this entryway we had an arch. All of the arch was found crumbled, fallen down in between these walls, and scattered below them ceramic tiles from the roof. And if we come over here, we can see the arch partially reconstructed.
In this region of Italy, where there's a dry season and a wet season, having a source of clean water, especially in an area that's fortified and potentially under siege, would have been a really important part of the defensive planning. So we were delighted, but not particularly surprised, to find a cistern in our excavations. We first detected a rectilinear cut that had been made through the bedrock, the tufo bedrock. This would have probably supported some type of wooden superstructure that would have protected the cistern, and potentially also had some sort of lid to close it. The cistern itself has a sort of collar, a round collar, and then spreads out into a bell shape beneath to a diameter of approximately 2 meters. We've excavated down about 1.5 meters and recovered material that filled it back in. But the hope is that in future seasons, we'll be able to recover materials that may have been deposited in the cistern upon abandonment of the site. In any case, it would have been a place where would have collected the rainwater and provided a source of fresh water atop the plateau that would have been convenient. You wouldn't have to go all the way down to the river to get it, and more importantly, would have supported you if you were ever under context of siege.
For the abandonment of this site, one of the things we're interested in studying is the level right underneath the collapse of materials that fell into the walkway, which I'm standing on here, or fell into this area beside the tower. We can carbon date those last animals that were deposited right before the building fell. To say a few words about this entryway, approaching the castle, we have a prepared street or walkway of poured mortar that comes in between these two side walls and approaches the gateway, where we have a few details that are worth pointing out. And a lintel on the bottom made of two large stones. And we can see here the mechanisms by which the gate opened and closed. There's one part here indicating the midpoint of the gate, where probably wooden doors would be able to swing open and closed. Behind that, in classic medieval fashion, you have a grate, a metallic grate of iron that comes down and is fastened between the wall here and the notches that are delicately and expertly carved out of this rock. As you walk into it here, you would have had to have the mechanism that opened and closed the vertically fallen gate.
In the gateway portal here between the lintel and those carved pegs would have fallen down a large doorway that would have protected the entrance. And in order to regulate the opening and closing of this structure, we have found some type of anchor stone or a weight, counterweight, that has a hole through the side of it. This would have been something they could have tied the door to. It could have been used to pull it shut again or pull it open again when the time had come. Over top of this doorway would have been a rather elaborate archway. We think at least the tufo stones that are cut in the archway, and then probably atop that some lines of additional stones that would have added to the sort of impressive nature of this doorway. And one of the things that we're interested in is how all of these construction phases articulate with each other. And part of one of the sort of things we'll be doing moving forward is analyses of the mortar and of the construction techniques to compare with other types of medieval sites in the region to get a sense of how our people living here on San Giuliano Plateau compared with their fellow people living here in the Middle Ages.
And if we walk over here, we can actually see the mechanism by which this gate and the arch over it was constructed. I want to draw your attention to a detail here, which was somewhat mysterious when we first started pulling these stones out inside the gateway. And that is this vertical line carving and diagonal lines coming off the vertical line. They almost look like symbols or a form of writing, but they're not. They're actually just functional. It's a pour-in mortar from the top. The mortar goes down the vertical lines and inside the diagonal, and it fastens the blocks together. So when we pulled them out, we were able to put them in their correct place based on the matching up these mortar lines.